So now it is time to set the chassis aside and start working on the outer suspension pieces. And we're going into the B bags. So I'm just going to gather a few items up, put them in the saved for probably never. So bag B. So we're starting off here with B1. Get another parts tray going. Okay, so you got a lot of adjustment right here. There are some other parts that come in a bag called tuning parts. Okay, it's not one of the lettered bags. And this is an important part of the build because this is where I start saving parts in a box. Which means I need a new box for this car. I tend to use these fishing boxes. They're pretty inexpensive. They sell them in packs of 4. I think 3 or 4. So any parts that I've got duplicates of, like these, that give you different settings. Okay, so let me just explain as one example. Okay, they give us these pieces right here. So your steering, if the car is horizontal right here, okay, here's the front end. This is basically left and right because this is at an angle because of caster. So if you have this piece this way, the axle is right on, the steering axle is right on top of the spindle. Okay, and if you put it 180 degrees, excuse me, the steering axle, or the axle the wheel rotates on, is further away. Okay, that can have a dramatic effect on handling, and it's called trail. You can see their settings right here. Okay, now there are other versions of these pieces that they've given us. You need 2 of them, one for each side, and you need to put them in the same orientation. So if you've got the holes, the 3 holes over here, you need the 3 holes on this end here as well. Okay, and those hold your bearings, and then the spindle goes through there. Okay, so right now, stock with just these 4 pieces, you would only have 2 possible settings for trail. These extra pieces give you extra trail options. Now, there's probably a part of the instructions where they show this to us. And it's going to make you see how this one is more offset than like this one. This one appears to be right in the center. So you've got several different options for how that is going to be set up, and then what effect it's going to have. So I'm going to take my box and I'm going to put these pieces, oh, I guess I'll just start over here with those. I'm not sure what these are for. Those will undoubtedly get explained to us at some point. They're probably for the transmission, for holding a rotating axle, depending on how many gears you're going to use in your transmission setup and whether it's lay down or stand up. Let me just gather this real quick so I can flip the pages here. These are the little pucks that you use to, or pills, I think they refer to them as, that you use on the, to orient your swing arms, how much rear toe, anti-squat are all going to be adjusted with those parts. Let's see if they, no, they don't give us anything extra there. Yeah, like this is where they talk about the extra gearing. There's usually some extra info on how to tune for that stuff. Let's see if it's back here even further. Negative. Okay, I will figure out where they hide that. It may be on a downloadable sheet, but I will get that info and set you up with it. See, here's another tuning piece we have here. Remember the little plastic piece that went underneath the steering block? The piece that went right here, that is a flat piece of plastic, okay? They give you an extra piece right here, which gives you 20 degrees. That doesn't look like 20 degrees. It has a 2.0 on it. And what that's going to do is change the angle of the kick. Kick is this angle right here on the chassis, okay? And that alters the steering geometry. It's kind of like the curve on the forks on a bicycle. I'm not going to go into a whole explanation of that. By putting this piece in, you change or lessen that angle. And there are, of course, tuning effects that are the result of that change. So that's also an item to be saved. And these pieces are our steering knuckles. They go in here, for example, and there's 2R, so 2 right, 1R, 1 right, 1 L, and the pieces we get out of the box are 3L and 3R. So it's I'm not sure if it's length or no, it's height. So that's going to determine bump steer. And let's see. So I'm going to go with the stock ones right out of the box, and then I'll see what I do from there. Okay. Okay, the recommended trail on the setup I'm using is 4, whereas the stock setting is 3, so I'm going to switch those. So I'm going to mix those up. I don't think so. Oh, it's upside down. It would really help if they labeled these. Well, it looks like we're missing a couple. Because there should be a pair of those. Maybe they just didn't get in the bag. Okay, well, I'm going to go this way. There we go. And what size screw do they want for that? 2.5 by 10. Do I have any 2.5s? I do not have any titanium 2.5. So that would be these two. Later in the series, I may try to put together a single video that goes over all the tuning options for this car and explains which parts, how to use them, what it's going to change. If you think that would help a lot, leave me a comment. I'll see if I can put that together. Okay, now, short story on these pieces. Those are for setting Ackerman. And Ackerman is one of those weird car geometry things that's a little hard to grasp. It's even when you understand the theory, it's even harder to figure out how to use it to your benefit. Okay. You have a corner. The front tire and the inner and outer front tires take different paths. Okay? The inner front tire has a shorter distance to go around the turn. So it has to turn tighter. Now, when the wheels are pointed forward, they both need to be straight ahead. How do you get something that, like if you had just a solid bar connecting them, if you turn left and right when both wheels are straight ahead at the center, how do you get it so one tire turns more than the other? And it has to do it progressively. The tighter the turn, the more the inside tire has to turn in relationship to the outer tire. How do you do that? And that has to do with adjusting the connecting arms and their angles and their relationships. And that's the short story. And now you're probably very confused because it doesn't really make sense. You can't do it with a straight bar. If you had a single straight bar, like on like an off-road truck would be a good example. They don't need Ackerman as badly because they're slipping and sliding in rough terrain. But a car that drives on the street or on a racetrack of asphalt, like let's say a Formula One car, where the tires have a tremendous amount of grip, if you had that kind of a setup with no Ackerman, one tire is going to be scrubbing and the other tire is going to be biting, and because they're turning the same amount, but one of the tires is taking a tighter turn than the other. So Ackerman is very important, and learning how to use it and how to set it up, what's the difference, what's the effect of having too much versus too little, things like that are all important to learn. And that's why you've got professional drivers versus everyone else. Those guys have really taken the time to understand the geometry and the physics behind car suspension. What happens is, like when you make a change in one place, you generally have an effect somewhere else as well. And you need to learn to balance that. And if I change this, yeah, okay, it makes that better, but what does it do on the downside? And coming up with a setup that works, for a specific track and the conditions is even harder, because you've got that changes for each track with its own conditions. If you got a lot of really tight turns, you would probably want more Ackerman. If you got a lot of wide sweeping turns, you could have less Ackerman. Things like that. And that's what makes those pro drivers professionals. Their cars just run better. They run faster. And it's also skill of driving, not crashing. All things being equal, the person that crashes the least usually gets across the line first. I've won races not with the fastest car, or even the fastest laps, but just by being completely consistent, never crashing. I won an oval track race once by like 14 laps because I stayed out of the fights, and I made my ovals as circular as possible, go to the outside, inside across the apex, back out again, stayed away from other people bumping into each other. And most people didn't even realize how far ahead I was when I won until the sheet came out. So, forward motion. I've got these pieces in. I'm using the number 3 recommended here, which is also on the setup sheet that I'm using from Dakota Fend, and I've got the lower amount of trail. I've got using these centered inserts, and again, those you're going to find in that separate bag of tuning parts. So now we can put our bearings in. They're just going to snap in. I'm going crazy with the smell of food from downstairs. My wife is making a shrimp scampi and Parmesan pasta dinner for us, and the smell is filling my workspace. I forgot my spacer. You should not do that. There's a little spacer that goes in between your bearings. Do not forget to put it in place. It's this unusual looking, looks like a washer, but it's not. It's a spacer. Busy thinking about food. And we do not need a washer back here. We just need our screw, and these are M3x6s, so I'm going to go titanium there. And here's my opportunity for another lesson. Unsprung weight. Very important. Okay, now you wouldn't think that, you know, switching this little screw from steel to titanium makes a big difference, and it doesn't terribly, but it's the idea that counts, and this is an opportunity for me to explain unsprung weight. Unsprung weight is weight on the car, any parts of the car that are not held up by the suspension. The biggest, most obvious example is your wheels and tires. Wheels and tires are unsprung. They ride on the ground. The car chassis is sprung weight. It hangs on the springs. So unsprung weight would be this entire assembly right here and the outer portion of the swing arm. And a small, so the heavier this is, the slower the suspension reacts. That's why, aside from the fact that they look good, why race cars generally don't have steel wheels. They have aluminum wheels. So unsprung weight would be this entire assembly right here. Aside from the fact that they're, you know, they're the sidewall, less flex, things like that, 1,000,001 factors there. But unsprung weight is incredibly important because it dictates how rapidly the suspension can react to a particular depression or you know, a dip in the pavement, and then return to neutral position. Looking for crescent wrench. There we go. Now we need our ball studs. Make sure that you're orienting them correctly, that you're not putting them in from below. Now you'll notice that we're putting this 1mm spacer here. This is not a washer, it's a spacer. And specifically, it's the bump steer spacer. You can see it on the setup sheets. And 1mm is what's recommended for the setup that I'm going for. It's also what's recommended for the stock setting. Oh, that's right. I didn't need the Loctite on there. This is plastic. Okay. Bump steer is the amount of deflection the steering gets when the suspension hits a bump and rises. Or if it goes up in the air and, you know, like if there's a hole and the suspension drops in relationship to the chassis, how much that alters steering angle. In other words, as the suspension goes up, it'll pull more or less on this and give a little bit of steering change. Ideally, you don't want bump steer. Okay, so we are at finished B2, and now we're moving on to B3. I'm going to go ahead and put these two items and this item in my parts box. That is interesting. It says B3, but the steering knuckles, or steering blocks, excuse me, I think this is the knuckle, that's the block, are not in there. That's peculiar. They're in B2. So these I'm going to set aside for the moment. We are going to need some of those spacers. Okay. So I'm going to put another pair of titanium turnbuckles on the steering blocks. That's these right here. They're going to connect to the other pair that are over here. That's a very critical connection there. So let's make sure get our orientation going correctly first. Just looking for any nomenclature on here. There is a 5. That's probably 5 degrees. So let's see. Okay, we've got, that's our left. Well, excuse me, that's our right. This is our left. And this is going to be our left side here, which is going to go like so. And then we have our, and we need 2 millimeters there. So I need a pair of 2s. And we're going for the inboard of the 2 holes. We could use the outer hole, but this is the recommended setup, so I'm going to start with that. just make sure I'm doing that correctly. Yeah. Always check your orientation. Okay, so we need 2 1s and a 2. So we're basically putting it dead center, neutral. Okay. So a 2 millimeter and 2 millimeter, 2 1s and 2 1s. We might as well put in our little bump steered, our steering limiting grub screws. This grub screw right here, M3 by 5. Those go in right here, and it limits our steering angle. And as you can see in this diagram, we need 1/4 of a millimeter, which is practically nothing, but it's going to be important nonetheless. That is going to be very hard to measure. I'm going to basically go with like 1 thread showing. Just a little bit. In fact, that's even much. About that ought to do. You can always adjust that later. Okay, there's 2 different pins here. One has a like a groove cut in the center. Those are going to be for the swing arm. These are going to be for our steering. So it doesn't matter whether you put the 2 1s below and the 2 above or vice versa, because basically you're getting 2 millimeters either way. But I'm just going to follow directions just for the simple sense of knowing what's where. That's a little tight. I'm going to go ahead and use a reamer on this. This is another good learning moment. I'll take this. Okay, this is where reamers are going to come in. And yes, that is what they're called. Even though it sounds filthy, it is a necessary tool. This is a reamer. These are made by Dynamite, and Dynamite actually, I don't know about any other tools they make, but their reamers are top of the line. What's most important is that these little cutaways here have a sharp edge, because you're going to be sliding them through these plastic holes. Actually, I think this needs a 2.5. Yeah, and it shaves off a small amount of plastic, and you got to be careful not to take too much material off, So do it incrementally. Like right off the bat, let's just slide this through, and we can see right off the bat that this is kind of tight. If I put this on a wrench here, wow, what size is that? Where's that? Yeah, okay. So see how it doesn't just, it should just fall like that. It shouldn't be able to stand up like that. So that's stiff. We don't want that stiction, that we don't want it to be not rotating freely. Actually, you know what? All we need is one to be clear. So let's go for the inner one. Okay, see, there we go. That works perfectly. So we can let it be tight in here, but as long as one of the surfaces is moving properly, we're fine. So let's go ahead and put this back together. So that's what we want. We want a nice, easy motion that isn't like stuck or sticking. Otherwise, if there's any play anywhere else, you're going to get this locking up on you, and it's just a problem. So no washer necessary. Now, this is another place where we don't need things to be tight, and that's why we've got lock washers there. Let's see, this is a 5mm. Yes. So I will show you what I mean. Okay, see, we don't need this to be tight. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap there because that doesn't matter. What matters is that this doesn't have any play up or down and can move freely. If we were to clamp down on this, that would totally defeat the purpose of reaming out that part and getting a smooth action going. So let's check this piece. Just like, and it's stiff as can be. So, and you can see there's little flecks of material here on this paper. See, that's all the reamer is taking, is a little bit of material, just shaving. And that's what you want, to just loosen it up. So there we go. Nice, smooth, no play. It's not fiddling around. So you want to make sure you don't take off too much material, because you certainly can with one of these tools. So we are done with that one, at least for the time being. Let's get our two 1mm spacers for the bottom. So easy action, nice and smooth, perfect. Left and right. Let me just get this dust out of here. Okay. So now we are onto our front arms.